Resident Evil's bioweapons aren't just zombie viruses. They're documented proof of what happens when human ambition has zero ethical limits. From parasites that keep you conscious inside a hijacked body, to a weaponized child who killed over 100 people just wanting a family, to something ancient that traps your consciousness forever after death. Today we're ranking the most disturbing virus lore in Resident Evil history. The last one will change how you think about dying. Las Plagas. Las Plagas technically isn't a virus, it's a parasitic arthropod, and normally that would make it less disturbing. It doesn't. Discovered dormant in the caves beneath a Spanish castle, Las Plagas has been used to control human populations since at least 1741, when a pagan cult called Los Iluminados enslaved the surrounding region with it. Centuries later, miners broke into those sealed caves and inhaled dormant spores. They didn't notice anything for weeks. By the time the cult leader Osmond Sadler understood what was happening, he had an army. The parasite enters through the jugular, or through inhaled spores, migrates to the spinal cord, and latches directly onto the nervous system. And here's what makes this uniquely terrifying compared to everything else on this list. T-virus zombies are brain dead. Zero awareness, zero cognition, just hunger. But Ganados, the infected in RE4, can talk, coordinate ambushes, wield chainsaws, and follow complex tactical orders. Luis Serra's own research notes compared Las Plagas to Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, the real-world zombie fungus that hijacks ants while keeping them technically alive. The implication is obvious and awful. You might be watching everything happen, completely unable to stop it, trapped behind your own eyes while someone else uses your hands. But wait, it gets worse when the host starts dying. When a Ganado sustains fatal injuries, the mature Plaga erupts from the neck or skull and fights for survival independently, all blades and thrashing tendrils. And in cases of multiple parasites, you get regeneradores, pale, emaciated nightmares that regrow severed limbs in real time and can only be killed by thermally scanning for every internal parasite hiding inside the body. One escaped containment during testing at Sadler's facility. It took 20 hours to recontain. It killed 7 researchers in the process. Sadler's actual endgame was to infect Ashley Graham, the US president's daughter, and send her home untreated. He would have had remote control of the American government through one infected girl's nervous system. But Las Plagas controls you in ways you can still recognize. It leaves something human at the wheel. The next entry doesn't even leave you that. T. Veronica. Alexia Ashford created this virus at age 10. Let that sit for a second. She was a child, a designer baby, cloned from her family's 19th century matriarch and engineered with artificially boosted intelligence genes. She graduated university at 10 and became Umbrella's youngest ever chief researcher. William Birkin, one of the most brilliant bioweapon scientists in the series, reportedly intensified his own G-virus research out of pure jealous rivalry with a literal child. T. Veronica was built by combining progenitor with ancient retroviral DNA, extracted from queen ant genomes and plant genetics. The ant component was deliberate. Alexia didn't want to create a weapon. She wanted to create a queen. The first test subject was her own father. When 12-year-old Alexia learned she and her twin Alfred were clones, she coldly captured Alexander Ashford and injected him with T. Veronica. The virus worked too fast. It destroyed his brain and mutated his body into something called Nosferatu. His heart burst through his chest wall. Combat tentacles grew from his torso. He was bound, gagged, and imprisoned in the Antarctic facility for years. Workers in that building reported hearing his screams regularly. Alexander had actually anticipated this might happen, and secretly built a contingency weapon against her, leaving it hidden with a recorded message for anyone who found it. Alexia then injected herself and entered cryostasis at age 12, faking her own death. She knew the virus needed time to properly bond with a living host. She calculated 15 years. She woke up at 27 with the ability to control insects through pheromone hive mind, produce combustible blood she could weaponize, and transform her body into a massive dragonfly organism. She regarded all of humanity as ants, and planned to reshape Earth into her colony. But here's the detail nobody talks about. A South American drug lord named Javier Hidalgo purchased T. Veronica from Wesker to treat his daughter Manuela's degenerative disease. Without Alexia's cryogenic technology, his alternative was regularly transplanting fresh organs to keep Manuela's body accepting the virus. His cartel kidnapped over 50 teenage girls from a nearby village and harvested their organs over several years. Manuela had zero idea where her treatments were coming from. T. Veronica didn't just create a monster, it created a pipeline for one. And if you think a virus with a 15-year activation window is slow-moving, the next entry killed a city in 3 days. T-Virus. Over 100,000 people died in Raccoon City in 72 hours. The T-Virus was created in 1978 by James Marcus, who spliced progenitor with leech DNA. William Birkin refined it later using Ebola traits and accidentally inherited Ebola's photosensitivity in the process. That mutation became pyrosensitivity, every BOW in the franchise being vulnerable to fire traces back to that one accident in a lab in 1978. The zombification process is clinical, and it is ugly. The virus inserts genetic code via reverse transcription, hijacks cells to produce copies of itself, and burns through the host's cellular energy doing it. Early symptoms are indistinguishable from flu: fatigue, fever spiking to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, itching. The outer skin layers erode and shed. Higher cognitive function shuts down systematically until only the brainstem is active. The host enters a coma, then it gets back up. There's a journal entry in RE1, written by one of the Spencer Estate's kennel keepers as the infection progressed. Short entries getting shorter, more disoriented, more desperate. It ends with 2 words: itchy, tasty. Umbrella knew roughly 10% of any population would be naturally immune to the T-Virus, so they created hunters specifically to hunt down survivors. They designed a predator to clean up their own failure rate. But the darkest thing the T-Virus ever produced wasn't in Raccoon City. It was Lisa Trevor. In 1967, Spencer's men abducted 14-year-old Lisa and her mother Jessica and injected them with experimental progenitor strains. Jessica died. Lisa survived but deteriorated mentally, desperately searching for her mother. Umbrella sent female staff members disguised as Jessica to observe her reactions. Lisa always saw through it. She ripped their faces off, believing they had stolen her mother's face, and wore the stitched results as a mask. For over 20 years, she was injected with every conceivable virus strain Umbrella developed. Researchers documented her in clinical reports and called her bastard in the margins. When they tried to execute her, she survived, was declared dead for 3 days, and kept wandering the tunnels. She finally found her mother's skeleton in a coffin, clutched the skull, said mother, and threw herself into an abyss. RE1 director Shinji Mikami said he designed Lisa specifically to make players feel sympathy and guilt. The T-Virus created a zombie apocalypse, but the G-Virus created something that hunted its own daughter, G-Virus. The G-Virus wasn't engineered. It was discovered inside Lisa Trevor's body. After 20 years of being injected with every pathogen Umbrella could produce, Lisa's immune system had absorbed and recombined them all into something completely new. When researchers injected the NE-alpha parasite, and it simply vanished, Birkin investigated and found a virus that had never existed before, born entirely from one abused woman's desperate biology. He named it Golgotha, after the biblical site of the crucifixion. The antidote he developed alongside it he named Devil. The religious symbolism was deliberate. Birkin spent a decade refining it in Umbrella's underground nest lab beneath Raccoon City, becoming increasingly paranoid and obsessive. The RE2 remake revealed he was running experiments on children from a nearby orphanage during the final research stages. When Umbrella sent agents to seize his work in September 1998, Birkin was shot and injected himself with the G-Virus rather than let them have it. Here's where it separates from every other virus on this list. G-mutants never stop mutating. Wounds don't weaken them, they accelerate the process. Birkin's 5 transformation stages go from a recognizable, one-armed human with a shoulder-mounted eyeball, to a 4-armed predator, to a hulking creature losing all human features, to something that tears the roof off a train car to fit inside it, to a formless mass of flesh and spikes, with partially absorbed, recognizably human corpses fused into its body. People he consumed, still visible, still shaped like people. But the G-Virus carries a biological imperative unique in the franchise. G-organisms are driven to reproduce. They implant embryos down victims' throats via tentacles. If the host is a blood relative, the embryo merges with them and produces a stable second-generation organism. If the host is genetically incompatible, which is nearly everyone, the embryo consumes their internal organs from the inside and bursts through their chest. This is why Birkin spent the entire game hunting his own daughter Sherry across Raccoon City. She was the the only genetically compatible host in the city. His virus needed her, but in the RE2 remake, the G2 creature hesitated when it found his wife Annette, only attacked when she drew a gun, and in its final moments, the creature screamed Sherry's name, a father's love, still there, fighting against a body that had already stopped being his. The G-Virus turned a man into a monster. What comes next turned an entire family into monsters, and made sure they remembered every second of it. Virus. 12,234 people were dissolved to clone one woman. The C-Virus was created by Dr. Carla Radames, who had completed a doctorate in genetics by age 15. She was recruited into a shadow organization called The Family by National Security Advisor Derek Simmons, and spent years developing a new strain by combining T. veronica with G-Virus antibodies extracted from Sherry Birkin's blood. The T. veronica component preserved cognitive function. The G-Virus component enabled mutations that made everything before it look restrained. Carla led the entire project. She was also desperately in love with Simmons, which he exploited completely. For years, the program abducted human test subjects, searching for a genome that could be rebuilt into a genetic copy of Ada Wong, a woman Simmons was obsessively fixated on. Every subject produced only monstrosities, 12,234 of them. When a researcher finally identified that Carla's own genome closely matched Ada's, Simmons had the answer he needed. He had his most devoted scientist restrained, injected with the C-Virus, and left to dissolve inside a chrysalid cocoon. The event was recorded on a VHS tape labeled Happy Birthday, Ada Wong. She emerged as a perfect physical copy of Ada. Simmons spent months conditioning her with false memories, but fragments of the original Carla kept surfacing. An internal document recovered later captured her inner voice. Someone crying in her head, saying, "Don't forgive him, kill him, crush everything he built." When full awareness returned, she founded Neo Umbrella and spent the rest of her life trying to burn his world down. She succeeded at considerable scale. The C-Virus itself is the most versatile mutation engine in the franchise. Direct injection creates Javo, intelligent soldiers with 15 documented localized mutation types. Destroy an arm, it becomes an insect claw. Blow off a leg, it sprouts a moth wing. Sever the head entirely, it regrows as a compound insect eye. Sustained damage can trigger a chrysalid state where the body completely liquefies inside a cocoon and reconstitutes as an entirely new creature. Airborne gas exposure creates zombies that can also cocoon mid-fight. Simmons himself, repeatedly injected during the final confrontation, cycled through human, canine, centaur, T-Rex, and giant fly mutations. When he finally died, his pooling blood formed the shape of the Umbrella Corporation logo on the ground. The Tall Oaks attack alone zombified approximately 70,000 people in a single strike. The US president was among the infected. Leon Kennedy shot him personally, but the true scale of Carla's plan was HAOS, a colossal BOW gestating in an underwater facility designed to spread C-Virus gas globally through asexual reproduction. It hatched at only 70.3% development. It nearly killed the entire team sent to stop it. At full development, every human on Earth gets infected. That's the C-Virus at scale. But the next entry didn't need a delivery system. It was designed to kill everyone on the planet who wasn't already a god. Ouroboros. Albert Wesker's plan was to load this virus into missiles, launch them to the tropopause, and let global wind currents do the rest. Every human on Earth infected simultaneously. Ouroboros was built directly from progenitor flowers harvested in West Africa and named after the ancient symbol of a serpent devouring its own tail, representing death and rebirth as a single event. The original prototype killed 100% of test subjects, 0 exceptions. The breakthrough came not from any laboratory refinement, but from a person Wesker was keeping alive specifically to exploit. After the Spencer Estate incident in 2006, Wesker captured the unconscious Jill Valentine and discovered something extraordinary. A mutant T-virus strain had been lying dormant in her body for 8 years since Raccoon City, and during her coma, her immune system had fought it to a standstill, producing extraordinarily powerful antibodies. Wesker kept her alive as a living factory. He administered T-virus doses repeatedly to stimulate antibody production, harvested what her body generated, and used it to stabilize Ouroboros. The side effects of prolonged exposure turned her hair blonde and her skin pale. He then controlled her using a progenitor-derived chemical called P30, delivered through a device mounted to her chest, and forced her to fight against Chris Redfield. Jill Valentine saved the world from Ouroboros, and spent 3 years conscious inside a body she couldn't control while it happened. For hosts that reject Ouroboros, which is nearly everyone, black leech-like tentacles erupt through the skin and consume the host from the inside out. The creature then absorbs any nearby organic matter, growing with every corpse and animal and piece of vegetation it touches. Excelligione, Wesker's tricell partner, was infected the moment she outlived her usefulness. Her body absorbed a pile of Magini corpses on a tanker deck and expanded into a roughly 70-foot mass of writhing black tentacles. The only vulnerability is orange glowing cores buried deep inside the mass, accessible only through fire. Here's what nobody talks about. No unmodified human has ever successfully adapted to Ouroboros. Every supposed survivor, including Wesker himself, was already a prior viral mutant before injection. His plan to gift the worthy with godhood was built on a foundation that had never once worked. A global release would have produced 0 gods and 0 survivors. His own file reads, "Tonight, Ouroboros and I shall awaken the best of this world. It is then that humanity will receive its final judgment." Chris and Sheva crashed his bomber into a volcano and killed him with rocket launchers as he sank into the lava. But even Ouroboros has a ceiling. It kills. What comes last doesn't kill you, it keeps you. The Megamycete, nobody created this one. Every other entry on this list traces back to a person with a syringe and an agenda. The Megamycete predates all of them. It is an ancient fungal superorganism of unknowable age, growing beneath a megalithic burial site in the mountains of Eastern Europe, and for millennia it did one thing. It consumed the bodies of the dead buried above it. Not just their DNA, their consciousnesses. Every mind it ever touched is stored inside it, aware, interacting with other stored minds in a state that is neither life nor death. It is a living database of everyone who has ever died near it. In 1919, a woman named Miranda lost her daughter Eva to the Spanish flu. Planning to end her own life, she stumbled into the Megamycete's cave and touched it. It flooded her with thousands of stored minds, including Eva's. It granted her near immortality, the ability to shapeshift into a murder of crows, and regeneration that made Ouroboros look fragile. She spent the next century posing as a religious prophet, using the surrounding villages as an endless experimental population, searching for a human vessel that could receive Eva's stored consciousness and bring her daughter back. 100 years. Hundreds of villagers, all of it for a child she lost in 1919. The 4 lords, the regional monsters of R.E. Village, are all Kudu experiments, parasites Miranda derived from mold-infected nematodes. Lady Dimitrescu, 9.5 feet tall, whose hereditary blood disease was amplified into a constant need for human blood, she processed into wine called Sanguis Virginis, blood of the virgin, sold commercially throughout the region. Her daughters were bodies composed entirely of insect swarms held together by Kadu, dissolving in cold air. Karl Heisenberg, who secretly built an army of cyborg corpses fused with mechanical parts, planning a rebellion Miranda never suspected. Donna Beneviento, whose hallucinogenic influence was powerful enough to generate RE8's most terrifying sequence without a single enemy. Just dread. Just a basement. Just something crawling that should not exist. Salvatore Moreau, warped into a grotesque aquatic creature, conducting failed experiments while desperately seeking approval from a woman who regarded him as a disappointment. All of them products of one organism that was never designed, never engineered, never contained. When Ethan detonated the explosives at the Megamycete's core, vast tendrils erupted from the ground and swallowed the entire village whole. Ethan, who was already a mold creature and couldn't survive the cure, triggered the blast himself. His body was destroyed. But in the shadows of Rose DLC, set 16 years later, Rose enters a surviving fragment of the Megamycete. Inside it, she finds her father, his consciousness still there, still aware, manifesting a shotgun to protect her one last time. The Megamycete doesn't just kill, it collects. And what it collects, it keeps forever. Every other virus on this list ends when the host dies. This one is just getting started. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.